Coming up this week on Breaking Badness, today we discuss APT for two. The U.S. Treasury says Chinese hackers stole documents in a major incident. Next up, spring cleaning, chat history edition. Ghosting may be a thing, but your messages could come back to haunt you if they're still lurking online, potentially exposing sensitive info you may have forgotten about. Time to do some digital spring cleaning. And of course, our fun game, Gold, Guidance, and Grievances. With that, Breaking Badness is next. Welcome to Breaking Badness, episode 198, recorded on January 6th, 2025. I am your co-host, Callie, APTina Faye Fensel. With me is co-host Tim, Digital Cleaning Sparks Joy Helming. And last but not least, Taylor, Burn Before Reading Wilkes Pierce.
Excellent reference.
Yes, excellent. But you're too, Tim.
Yeah, I need to do some serious Marie Kondoing, digital and otherwise. The holidays are always a good reminder of that because you're cleaning up all the boxes and whatnot. But for me, anyway, it makes me look around and go, yeah, there's a lot more than just holiday box stuff that I could probably tidy up around here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I hear that. I need to go through my inbox. At least I'm not, my husband is one of those people that his inbox is like 5,000 unread messages. And I'm like, I don't know how you live this way.
Right.
That's me. You just
That's you.
Yeah, I tried it. I'm not an inbox zero person, but I do try to get to unread zero as or close to it as possible.
Yes.
Inbox infinite.
You and I are in this boat, Tim. I don't like the notification of this is
Exactly.
coming. Yeah.
Yeah, I know I have the OCD about the little red badge. I want the little red badge to go away.
Somehow, like on my phone, even if I have unread email, I don't get the badge on my phone anymore. I don't remember.
Yeah. I realized you're that good. You're that good. You don't need a badge.
We're like, she's got this. So we should talk about some InfoSec. I think it would be a good thing to do.
Yeah. Also, reminder, top of the year, make sure you add winter 2025 onto the end of your passwords. So that way.
Yeah, good idea. I just saw some article about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is still way up there. I'm thinking if you're that lazy, why don't you make it ASDF? It's slower to type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and one of the first ones that's going to get guessed. If it's more important to you to be lazy and easy to remember, then
maybe they've got a system.
That's right.
I only have so many deceased pets that I can.
Yeah, right.
Luckily, there's only a limited number. But yeah, what am I supposed to do when I go through the Rolodex and I get to the
snowball?
It would be fun to do an episode devoted to OPSEC. That would actually be entertaining. Then we could talk about things like throwing chaff with false security questions and answers and stuff like that.
We could do it. We can do whatever we want, Tim.
The options are limitless.
The first thing that I wanted to talk about was APT for two. Was it over the holidays?
Depending on what your definition of when the holidays start. Some people, they start at Halloween. So by that definition, it was definitely within the holidays. But yeah, it was December.
Yeah, I would like to expand my definition to include Halloween because it is the best holiday.
So that's in a lot of cases. If you ask a lot of retailers in terms of when they start putting usually Christmas themed stuff in their stores, that's like September at this point.
Yeah.
It's the moment the first pumpkin spice latte hits.
Yeah, that's right. So anyhow, yeah, we're very safe in saying this occurred during holiday 2024.
Yeah. So the U.S. Treasury reporting that Chinese hackers stole major documents. Oh, yeah. 2 thumbs down for sure. Taylor, you're right. Usually, though, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, when a major federal department is hacked, it's not normally the department itself. It's a third party, right?
Yeah, there are subtleties here. First of all, there are the ones that we know about, and then there are the ones that we don't know about. And if it was a direct breach of an agency without any third party being involved, and especially if really extremely sensitive national security type things were involved, it's possible that we would never know about that. And there are probably some that are in that category. And then the other sort of caveat here is, what do you mean by third party? Like in this case, we'll talk about how it was a third party that had access in and they were the ones that got compromised. But if you include an exploited vulnerability in software, it's third-party software, but that software vulnerability was the vector into the department that got hacked. So is that a third party? I don't know. But yes, I think in the spirit of what you're asking, I think it is not uncommon for either it to be a supply chain attack like what we saw with SolarWinds, or something like this. And there was another one fairly famously a couple of years ago where it was a tech support outfit that got compromised. And do either of you remember who it was that they compromised? I don't remember if it was government or private sector, but anyway, it was a tech support firm getting breached that was the vector in a pretty major breach.
Taylor, you can just say it out loud. Wipro?
Yeah, I don't think
I-
so. I don't think so.
I genuinely don't know. That's why I didn't want
Not
to
the
say
one
it
I
out
would, but
loud.
anyhow, yeah. So it's one of the fundamentals of looking at your overall exposure, whether you're a government agency or a private entity, that your attack surface includes any entity that has privileged access into your organization. It's not just your own, the stuff that you control directly. And so this is just yet another reminder of what that extended attack surface looks like.
In this article, threat researcher Tom Hagel, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Sentinel-1 had stated this incident fits the pattern of operations by China-linked groups focusing on attacking third parties. Do we know, do other nation state entities prefer other methods then?
Callie, I'm just getting word that the judging panel does accept Hegel as the pronunciation for Tom's last name. So I think I looked into this a little bit as we were preparing for the podcast, and I think really APT groups, state-sponsored activity groups, hackers, et cetera, whatever you want to call them, smart threat actors are going to use whatever is available. And so I don't think you could make a strong case that Iran and North Korea and Russia and others that are hostile toward the United States, for example, wouldn't use a third-party attack like this. They're gonna look around for whatever is a potential vector in there. And likewise, certainly we've seen China using all kinds of methods to get into different targets of theirs. He's not wrong, but I don't think you could really rule any of the other major hostile actors out of using this kind of method either.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to ascertain is based on using or attacking a third party, and then Reuters, which is the article we're referencing, also stated based on available indicators, and we might not know what all of the available indicators are, but like how do you get to pinpoint that it's China versus Iran versus...
So, as many of our listeners have heard us say before and will hear us say again, attribution is hard. Usually, unless the actor leaves some kind of a calling card claiming responsibility, which happens once in a while, but not very often, and pretty much never with espionage, there are going to be different kinds of clues depending on what the attack was. For example, there are sometimes certain malware families are known to be favored by a given state-sponsored group. There wasn't a malware family involved in this particular incursion. And so when malware is implanted and you've got binaries that you can start looking at, then sometimes you will find language cues in those. That also was not the case here. Some of it may have to do with what they were targeting. For example, we don't know what the documents were that they got hold of. We do know that the official story, anyway, is that they were unclassified documents that were accessed. But let's say that these documents were mainly oriented around U.S. Treasury policy toward China. That probably would be pointing in a direction of China being the actor here. So without knowing a little more about what the specific indicators were, it's hard for us to know exactly how they did that attribution. But those are examples of some of the ways that it is carried out. And we all know that there are false flag operations that happen. It's not entirely difficult to plant little seeds that are indicative of one actor when in fact it's a different actor doing it, hoping to cover their cracks. That happens. And so these are some of the reasons why it really is tricky, and why there are people who are serious experts of many years experience that are the ones that get involved in attempting to do that attribution. And at some points in the past, and probably even currently, looking at the IP addresses that people were coming from to do this stuff, but anybody can get a VPN and masquerade where they're coming from. So IP source is dubious at best as an indicator. So it's usually going to be a melange of different things that put together suggest some confidence level of attribution to the party that they attribute it to. And you hear this all the time. We assess with moderate confidence that it was XYZ. We assess with high confidence it was 1, 2, 3. So in this report, I didn't see, I'm not sure I noticed a specific confidence level that was given, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of dispute about who this might have been.
That makes sense. And like you said, attribution's hard. And unless they have a calling card, you might not fully know. But what has China been saying about the accusation?
Of course, they say we don't do those kinds of things. China has always opposed all forms of hacker attacks.
Okay.
So Beijing firmly opposes the US's smear attacks against China without any factual basis. Blah, blah, blah. It's the things that diplomats always say in the aftermath of something like this. So what they're saying is exactly what we expected them to say.
Okay.
Yeah, they probably use large language models at this point to just say an outraged response to the assertion that we were behind the cyber attack. Okay, that looks good.
An iambic pentameter.
Yeah, that would be a lot more fun.
Now shorten it for X and the other platforms where we have
That's right. Stay
limitations.
within the character counts.
This is a breach of a remote support product. Would you say these are the types of products adversaries prefer to breach? Would you say it's like easier to hack into remote support products?
So the question becomes, it's back to that extended notion of the extended attack surface, right? So one of the things you're going to look for if you want to breach a target organization is, where is the privileged access into that organization? One example of where that privileged access is would be something like employee login portals. And we definitely see those get spoofed and credentials stolen and them used as a way in. So that's privileged access. But tech support, anything that has like remote desktop access or remote access to file shares, things like that, is another vector with privileged access into the target organization. So yeah, so any outsourced support firm is absolutely a useful vector to breach an organization. And if you know about a particular, or if you're exploring around in a particular support type organization or managed services organization, something like that, and you can figure out who their customers are, then you've got a menu of potential targets available to you. And I think a lot of the managed services and technical support, et cetera, organizations, they're looking out as much as anybody else is, probably more than most, for any signs that they've been compromised, because that does then give a threat actor access conceivably into many more or all of their customer base, depending on the nature of the compromise that occurred. So yeah, I mean, it's the way to assess whether something is likely to be a vector into an organization is what degree of privileged access that entity has into the organization of interest.
Thank you, Tim, for walking us through this. This was really interesting to learn more about. So that leads us to what we like to do after we talk about each article, which is give it a rating, which we call a hoodie rating if it has been a bad sort of attack, or a goodie rating if something good happened within the industry. So in this case, we're probably going to give it a hoodie rating. And we do it on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being absolutely catastrophic and 1 being, this is not so bad. Maybe it's something we want to watch for in the future. But yeah, since we just heard from you on the background of this story, Taylor, we'll start with you on your hoodie rating. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think this is the tale of oldest times, like using a third-party service provider to get access to it. We saw it with the Snowflake breach kind of over the summer of last year. This is not super dissimilar, although in that case, it was a little more unwitting, where that individual had downloaded an info stealer and had accidentally given access more so than a persistent campaign or targeted campaign. But reminds us that, hey, it's effective and they're doing it because it works. The particular like vector here may still be open for some folks. So I'll go 6.5 hoodies.
I feel like that's the highest I've seen you go in a while, actually.
It's probably indicative of something. There may be more to it, and there are more systems that see that there's more access here that has not been locked down from some of this. But yeah,
And you are going on the half. Normally, you're like you do a lot of decimals. So this is serious
I picked it up. This is
Tim, do you feel similarly? Would you go lower?
No, I'm right in the same neighborhood because I think there are a lot of unknowns here, and Taylor's kind of indicating some of them. So we don't know the extent of compromise at Beyond Trust. So we don't know whether there are other customers of Beyond Trust that are affected like this, and maybe we never will know, or maybe more will come to light later, or maybe this is a really seriously isolated incident that is getting contained fairly well and fairly rapidly. So a lot of unknowns with this. But anytime a major government agency does get successfully breached, that's a big deal. And again, they're telling us that unclassified documents were accessed. There may be things that they can't tell us about this. We don't know. So yeah, put me down for 6. Let's hope we don't hear any more and that we are able to, in the future, that the hoodie rating sign it rides down.
Yeah, if in 6 months we don't say anything about this breach again, then sure, it should go
This
down.
didn't turn out to be just the first early warning of a much bigger thing.
If we were to assign a sound to this, would it be like,
That's not bad. That's not a bad starting point. That's a sound I could endorse. Yeah.
okay, cool. All right, now step into 2025. We're talking about cleaning your junk out, like
Putting away the lights.
putting away the lights, Marie Kondoing. And Wired is saying maybe part of that cleaning should be cleaning out your chat history because lingering chats could be exposing some sensitive info you may have forgotten about. So, Taylor, how long are chat histories typically saved on servers?
It depends on the service and the server, but for some of them, many decades. Yeah, it depends on where and who.
I guess, is that beneficial to an organization to keep that info for decades? Like, it seems like it could be costly.
For sure. Now, I think the older one that I'm thinking of here, and it's referred to in the article, is the Google, all the various Google chats that have existed over time. But the oldest one they talked about were the original G chats that were tied into Gmail, which if you used, it's time to go take ibuprofen. When they shifted over to 3 different chat products later, those old messages are actually just in your mail inbox. So they shifted those into the historical inbox, so you may have stuff from 2004 in there.
Because as I'm thinking about this in my stream of consciousness thought, AOL AIM is no more.
Yeah.
Does that mean all the chat history is gone now?
Great question. They didn't get into that there. I think those are gone. I don't know that those predate the cloud.
Yeah.
So maybe if you...
That's one of those things where if they were trying to retain all of those chats from the beginning of AIM, undoubtedly we would find out, sorry, we just weren't able to do that.
Like how many moody away messages are just still lingering out there? We don't
Still
know.
out there just waiting. ICQ, all these kind of peer-to-peer ones. Yeah, the AIM one is interesting. I wonder if you could just buy lots of old servers, go through the hard drives and see.
Oh, I hope not. It's so cringe.
But for most of what this article is discussing, they're more talking about your personal group chats, your WhatsApp threads, and the various things you may have in your history on these different services.
Yeah, and for listeners that may not know the difference, what is the difference between sending a message on something like Signal versus sending something on social media messenger?
Even then, it depends on the messenger. And there's this concept of end-to-end encryption, wherein the 2 parties or the parties to the chat themselves all hold the encryption keys, and the service provider themselves, they don't have access to those keys. So your kind of WhatsApp from, I think, 2016 on has operated in this fashion. Signal, Telegram claims to, Signal does, I think, a little more so openly, but I'm sure I'm wrong. I'm sure I'm wrong. I'm sure we'll see it in the comments. Are these things encrypted end to end, or are they stored on the servers with access to the service provider to get to those?
So if I just left all of my chats alone, like, and I didn't delete them, like, what's the risk behind that?
I think it's more, hey, if someone were to gain access to those, let's say someone stole your friend's phone and now they've got access to that chat and everything's in there. The things you said 10 years ago, the things you sent 15 years ago, these things may not have any context or make any sense in the current age. You may not want those things out there. It is, I think, is some of the context on this. But some of it is just, it's a way of kind of regaining control of these things and saying, hey, maybe you should put auto deletes on for your various chat services. So with iMessage, you can say, hey, delete things over a year. Some services do delete things. Slack will delete things after a year. There are services that, like you said, they don't want to hang on to these things. Although in an era now where these messages are also being used to train large language models and the like, you may have a vested interest in not opting in to those things. And maybe you want to curate and delete your kind of digital footprint from that perspective.
I was absolutely going to ask you about AI because we can't have a conversation anymore without talking about AI.
Oh, good grief. No, you're right.
Do certain messenger apps use that to train the large language models? Is that kind of like stuff that's hidden in the privacy policy that maybe people just don't read?
I believe Slack is using theirs to train. X or whatever, Twitter, we'll call it Twitter. I'm not going to. Twitter has absolutely said that they'll use everything that's not bolted to the floor to train whatever they want. For it may be time to go into some of these platforms and curate your direct messages, your DMs, as it were, because I think a lot of those are not going to be encrypted end to end, especially if they're going back a long time. All those chats you had with Tom on MySpace are likely not encrypted end to end, so you're going to want to like maybe pull some people out of your top 8 friends. I don't know. I was just thinking from a domain and DNS perspective, if you're sharing URLs with your friends over the course of decades, like the ownership of those things are going to change, and maybe you don't want to be linking to things
Oh, yeah,
a
really.
decade on.
Can you say a little bit more about that for our audience? Like,
Let's say I thought something was the bee's knees 5 years ago and said, hey, this is a great website. And then that person no longer owns it. It goes back into the pool of names and somebody else registers and says, oh, a lot of people were linking to this thing.
It could be even like your own domain. You could have had a domain that was an interesting domain name to you 10 years ago that you let lapse because it's not interesting to you anymore. But your friends want to go see your cool domain again, and they go visit it, and it's now a malware site.
shoot.
A video game review site.
Oh man, yeah, I don't love that at all. It's interesting you say it from that perspective because like the perspective I was thinking from was hacking into a server with these conversations and like maybe using them for more personalized phishing purposes. Is that too much of a stretch?
You're not going to really get into someone's group chat all that easily, I don't think. I don't know. Like now, maybe the larger like Telegram channels where people can join. I don't know. Maybe you could scrape those things and target people with that data. But at that point, everyone's opted into the channel. A little different here. But certainly the advice here from the Wired article is more to assess your stance on these things. And we've talked about over the years, your digital footprint from like location data being sold online to just the things that you keep around. Make sure that you've put active thought into it. If you love the messages, you can always pull them local and encrypt them yourself and keep them off of someone else's computer, as it were.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that though, because do all parties in the chat need to simultaneously delete everything? Because if I delete something, doesn't everybody else need to as well?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a team effort here. To the extent that you want to follow through on this,
Host
you'll
a
need the
delete
other
party. Get together with all your friends, virtually or in person, and have a big delete party.
Maybe that's just New Year's Eve.
Interesting. Okay. And then circling back to company chats like Slack and Teams, like you had mentioned, they save data for a little bit. I think certain organizations, like you can opt into saving it for longer, I would assume. But what's the cause for concern there from an organization perspective?
I think there's not a whole lot new here from if someone gets access to your chat platform, you're in trouble. That's not a great sign. And they'll have access to public channels and whatever channels the account that they have compromised has access to, they'd be able to take a look at too. So maybe it's in your best benefit to maybe not retain everything in Slack for longer than you have to, but then you may be in an industry where you need to retain things from a regulatory perspective.
All right. Thank you, Taylor. I think this is something interesting to take away for some spring cleanings, for some digital spring cleaning. I know this isn't necessarily, it's not a hoodie story. It's not really a goody story either. It's more of what we might call the ants on a log story, where it's not inherently good, it's not inherently bad. It's just some advice that Wired is giving to the population here. How many ants on a log, Tim, would you give this?
Yeah, individual results may vary was never more applicable, I think, than this particular item. Let's see, the more ants we have, the more either good or bad it is, depending. I guess I'm going to say 5 because the badness is highly variable. Some people, it may not really matter that much if what's in their chat history gets exposed. And for some people, it would be catastrophic. So where do you put that line? And likewise, the goodness. If it didn't matter, then how much have you done for yourself by deleting that chat history that didn't matter that much to begin with versus other great things you could have been doing with that time? So who knows? I'm just going straight down the middle, 5 ants on the log.
That's fair. Taylor, do you feel similarly?
I'm at 4 ants on the log. I think interesting things that I took away from the article are more that concept of, hey, what are the platforms that you're active on from a messaging perspective? What are their terms and conditions? What are they going to do with your data? And then how easy is it to delete it? In some of these cases, you've got to go through DM by DM to delete it. That could be a pain. So maybe set aside a little more time for your delete party. But then for other folks, is this actionable? Maybe not. It's along the lines of, hey, you should reboot your phone every now and then.
Yeah.
4 ants.
4 ants, 4 and 5 ants. Okay, cool. All right. Thank you, Taylor, for that. I appreciate it. And that brings us to the final piece of this show, which is we're going to talk about some gold guidance and grievances. It's the first one of the year, which is fantastic. Again, if you're a newer listener, first of all, thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. We do like to cap off our episodes with our game Gold Guidance and Grievances, where we talk about something good that it doesn't have to be in the InfoSec industry, but it could be something good that's happened, any advice that we might have, and anything that is grinding our gears. We also like to start with the grievance and work our way back because it's more fun to end the episode on a high note. Taylor, we just heard from you. So Tim, we'll start with your gold guidance and grievances, please.
Yes, not in that order. Starting with the grievance, the news that some folks may have seen that Siri, quote unquote, accidentally was recording conversations. Sad trombone. Color, no one's surprised by this, I think. Maybe some people are, but I was not the least bit. I have not ever enabled Siri. That doesn't mean, by the way, that she couldn't be sitting there silently listening. It might just mean that she's not doing me any favors along the way. I've just always been very nervous about all these devices that are connected and have mics and cameras on them, especially those ones that we carry around in our pockets all the time. So I was disappointed to see that. There was a fine levied. It's not real high. 95 million is pocket change for Apple. So anyway, Siri, don't do that anymore, please. Guidance, there were stories about a bunch of Chrome extensions that had been backdoored. And so you can go and find lists of the ones that are known to have been backdoored. And I recommend that you do that. If you are a person that has installed Chrome extensions, uBlock Origin is not one of them, thank goodness. None of the big ad blockers was on the list that I saw. So that's good. That's mostly what I do with Chrome extensions. But anyway, if you are an extension fan, you should probably go take a look and make sure you don't have something that got backdoored. And for gold, I just thought this was interesting. There's so much in the world of drones and robots and whatnot that's fairly terrifying these days. And some of it is amusing and entertaining. But I saw some video of firefighting drones, and that could legitimately save lives. And so when robots are doing things like fighting fires and doing bomb disposal or whatever dangerous jobs like that, I'm happy to see that. I will be honest, I semi-wondered if this footage was fake or real, because it seemed to me like, first of all, water's pretty heavy stuff to be carrying around. And it looked like they were using water and not foam or something like that in the footage that I saw. And there wasn't a lot of Newton's third law, like turn on the water and it pushes the drone backward type stuff. So maybe I'm a little skeptical, but we're probably not far off from that being a thing. And that would be a great use of drones. So I'm supportive of that. So let's
That
keep
would be
our human firefighters safe.
Yeah, like in my mind, I'm seeing the hose hooked up to the drone And now the drone has that's how I would
The ones
imagine.
I thought they were carrying a little tank, but the one that you are describing, that would be a tankless job.
Thank you, Tim. Taylor, what about your gold guidance and grievances? Not in that order.
Yeah, I'll say it's too early in the new year for me to have
That's good.
Good.
I
Okay.
can't get there just yet. Guidance was from what I learned from the article is that if you use like Google Chat, those messages are in your Gmail inbox, which I did not know, and also take an ibuprofen. And then my gold is one of the things that we have talked about on this podcast a few times is the selling of location data in online data being sold via ad brokerages and things like that. And the FTC actually took its first action against Mobile Wallet. So this is the first step into trying to maybe claw back some of that. We'll see.
It's going to be a long road.
That's my goal. But it's the first step.
That's great, guys. Thank you so much for sharing your gold guidance and grievances. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and opinions on those articles from today. Very interesting stuff. So yeah, welcome back. We're back, baby. And we hope that our listeners stop back and hang out with us again next week for another all new episode of Breaking Badness. We really appreciate it. So thank you and stay safe out there, everyone. Have a great one.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Cheers.
That's about all we have for this week. You can find us on Twitter @DomainTools. All of the articles mentioned today will be included in our blog post, which can be found at blog.domaintools.com. Catch us every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time when we publish our podcast and blog. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next week on another episode of Breaking Badness. Until then, remember, don't drink and click.